Welcome to Quiet Vector ASMR. Take a deep breath. Let the air fill your lungs slowly, and as you exhale, imagine the weight of the digital world simply falling away. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tension in your jaw soften. You are entering a space defined not by speed, but by the steady, unhurried pulse of history. Today, we are beginning a journey into the heart of a medium that does not just hold color, it holds the weight of centuries. We are stepping into a monument of living stillness, the art of stained glass. Imagine, if you will, standing in the center of a great stone cathedral in the 12th century. Outside these thick, heavy walls, the world is a place of harsh survivalist reality. It is a world made of wood and mud, of gray, overcast skies, and hard, unforgiving earth. But in here, the walls are made of jewels. To understand the window, we must first descend back to the fire. In the medieval forest glassworks, this was an act of true alchemy. It began with the most humble of earthly materials, river sand and wood ash. Consider the selection of the sand. The artisans would search the riverbeds for silica of a specific purity, tiny grains that had been tumbled by water for eons until they were ready to surrender their solid form to the heat. They mixed this sand with potash, the wood ash gathered from the beech trees that surrounded their forest huts. The potash acted as a flux, a chemical bridge that allowed the sand to melt at a temperature the primitive furnaces could actually reach. Imagine the heat of that furnace. It is a low, roaring hum that you feel in your chest more than you hear with your ears. It is a constant, vibrating energy. Inside clay pots, these raw elements were heated until they surrendered their solid nature and became a molten, glowing liquid. A liquid that held the potential for the divine. But clear glass was never the goal of these forest masters. They were not looking for a way to see the outside world more clearly. They were looking for a way to transform the light itself. This is where the secret pot metal recipes come in. To create the deep oceanic blues, those shades of sapphire that seem to vibrate with internal energy when the sun hits them, the glassmakers added ground cobalt. For the lush, mossy greens that mirrored the forest floor, they used oxidized copper. And then there was the crimson, the rarest and most expensive of all the medieval colors. To achieve that deep, resonant ruby red, the artisans often had to throw actual gold into the molten mixture. When you look at a red pane in an 800-year-old window, you are literally looking at gold suspended in glass, held in place for eternity by the power of fire and the patience of sand. Visualizing this process is the first step in our journey towards stillness. We are moving from the raw earth to the refined spirit. In the next few moments of silence, imagine that glowing golden liquid cooling, slowly becoming the jeweled light that has guided weary travelers home for nearly a millennium. Once the glass had cooled and been flattened into discs, the work shifted from the fire to the hand. Listen now to the rhythm of the craft. The medieval glazier didn't have the laser-sharp steel cutters we use today. They used a hot iron to crack the glass into rough shapes, and then a tool called a grozing iron. Imagine the sound. A gentle, rhythmic chip, chip, chip. as they nibbled away the jagged edges of the glass, bit by bit, to fit the precise geometry of the window's design. A sound of tactile patience. A sound that reminds us that beauty is carved with time. These fragments, the sapphire blue, the amber, the gold-infused red, were then puzzled together using strips of soft lead called cames. The lead was flexible, like a dark ribbon wrapping around the light, holding each jewel in place against the wind and the rain of centuries. The artisans would solder these joints, creating a rigid skeleton that could carry the weight of a story. Consider the famous chartres blue. At the Cathedral of Chartres in France, there is a specific shade of blue glass so intense, so resonant, that for a long time, modern science couldn't replicate it. It reacts to the changing sunlight differently than modern glass. At twilight, when other colors fade to gray, this blue seems to glow with an internal energy, as if it is drinking in the last of the day's light. It is a lost recipe, a secret kept by the sand. These windows were not just decoration. They were the poor man's Bible. For a population that could not read words, the windows were a cinema of stillness. They told stories in circles and squares, narratives climbing from the floor up to the ceiling. But even without the story, just the feeling of the light is enough. There is a concept in architecture called lux nova, new light. The idea is that light, passing through these sacred colors, is physically changed. It becomes something spiritual, something that calms the nervous system. Neuroscience tells us that our environment shapes our internal state. When we sit in a space filled with this new light, our cardiac patterns decelerate. Our minds move into a state of receptive alertness. We are no longer in the defensive arousal of the outside world. We have found a quiet vector. As we close today, visualize a single rose window, a massive wheel of stone and glass. At the center, a point of stillness. Radiating outward, petals of violet, amber, and sapphire. The light that hits your eye has traveled millions of miles from the sun, just to be filtered through this specific piece of history right now. You are seeing the same light that a weary traveler saw 800 years ago. A bridge across time, built of sand and fire. Take that stillness with you into the rest of your evening. Thank you for listening to Quiet Vector ASMR. Rest easy. Focus deeply. Stay grounded.